Once upon a time there was a little, nice girl. She was sweet to everyone who only saw her. But she was the loveliest and dearest of all to her grandmother, who did not even know what to give her beloved granddaughter. Once she gave her a red velvet hat. And since this hat was very suitable for her, and she did not want to wear anything else, they began to call her Little Red Riding Hood. Once her mother asked to take a piece of cake and a bottle of wine to her grandmother. They say that she is both sick and weak, it will be good for her. She ordered my mother not to run away from the road, otherwise she would fall and break the bottle, and then grandmother would get nothing. And when she comes to her grandmother, so that she does not forget to say hello to her. Little Red Riding Hood obeyed, took the presents and set off. And my grandmother lived already behind the forest, half an hour walk from the village. And as soon as Little Red Riding Hood entered the forest, she met a wolf. The girl, however, did not know what kind of fierce beast it was, and was not in the least afraid of him. She greeted politely. The wolf also behaved very decently, so Little Red Riding Hood told the wolf that she was bringing gifts to her beloved grandmother. And while she was telling how to get to her grandmother's house, the wolf thought to himself how he could eat not only the old woman, but also a pretty girl. And then the wolf thought of showing Little Red Riding Hood a huge meadow with beautiful flowers. Little Red Riding Hood, as she looked at the many wonderful flowers, thought that it would be nice to bring grandmother a fresh bunch of flowers, because that would also please her. Yes, and ran away from the road to the side, and began to collect flowers. Slightly picking one flower, as the other beckons her, it is even better, and she will run after that. And so it went further and further into the depths of the forest. And the wolf ran straight to grandmother's house and knocked on the door. Grandma asked who was there. And the wolf replied in a thin voice that it was Little Red Riding Hood who brought the pie and wine. The old woman believed and ordered to press on the latch and enter. The wolf pressed the latch, the door flew open, and he ran to his grandmother's hut. He rushed to grandmother's bed and swallowed it at once. Then he put on his grandmother's dress and her cap on her head, went to bed and waited. Meanwhile, Little Red Riding Hood ran and ran after flowers, and when she collected as many of them as she could carry, then she again remembered about her grandmother and went to her house. She was very surprised that the door was wide open, and when she entered the room, she called out to her grandmother. There was no answer. The granddaughter came up to the bed and saw grandmother was lying, and she had pulled her cap on her very nose, and it seemed so strange. Little Red Riding Hood asked with bewilderment why grandmother had such big ears. And the wolf answered in a grandmother's voice to hear better. Then Little Red Riding Hood asked why grandmother had such big eyes. To better see you, the wolf answered. And the arms are so big that it is easier to grip. And when Little Red Riding Hood saw the wolf's mouth and only asked why grandmother had such a nasty big mouth, the wolf pounced on her, screaming, "So I could eat you!" And how he jumped out from under the blanket and swallowed the poor girl. Having had enough in this way, the wolf again went to bed, fell asleep, and began to snore as much as he could. At that time a hunter was passing by the grandmother's house, heard snoring and wondered if something had happened to the old woman that she snored so. He entered the house, went to the bed and saw that the wolf was sleeping there. And he has been hunting this villain for a long time. He wanted to kill him with a gun, but it occurred to him that the wolf, perhaps, swallowed his grandmother and that she could still be saved. That is why he did not shoot, but opened his wolf's mouth wide, and saw a red cap flashed there. a girl jumped out of her mouth and said that her grandmother was still there. The hunter opened his wolf's mouth even wider, and the old grandmother somehow managed to get out behind the Red Riding Hood. They were delighted, began to hug and thank the hunter. They decided to teach a cunning wolf a lesson. They brought up large stones as soon as possible, stuffed them into the wolf's mouth and belly, and carried him out into the yard. And when the wolf woke up, he saw the hunter, and was about to escape, but could not bear the weight of the stones, and fell to the ground. This delighted all three, while the wolf got up and barely dragged its heavy belly into the dark forest. They never saw him again. This is how they taught the cunning wolf a lesson, and Little Red Riding Hood decided that she would never again disobey Mother's orders.
Once upon a time, there was a woman who had no children. She once went to a good witch for help. The woman said she was dreaming of a child. The sorceress gave her a seed and ordered to plant it in a flower pot. The woman was very happy, thanked the old woman, and went home. At home, she planted a seed, watered it, and began to wait patiently. Soon a large wonderful flower, like a tulip, grew in the pot. When its petals opened, there was a tiny girl inside. She was very small, no more than an inch. Therefore, the woman called her Thumbelina. One night, when Thumbelina was fast asleep, a huge toad climbed onto the window of the house, wet and ugly. She grabbed the sleeping girl and hurried to her swamp. The toad decided to marry her ugly son to the beautiful Thumbelina. She planted her in the middle of the river on a wide lily leaf so that the girl would not run away. In the morning, Thumbelina woke up, and realized that she was not at home, but there was water around her. When the girl realized what a terrible fate awaited her, she wept bitterly. At this moment, small fish swam past. They felt sorry for Thumbelina. They gnawed at the stem of the lily, and the leaf floated with the flow with the girl. A large beetle flew past. Seeing a beautiful girl, he grabbed her and carried her to a tree, where he introduced her to his friends. They all envied her beauty, but said that Thumbelina was very ugly and could not be in their company. Under pressure from acquaintances, the beetle also decided that she was ugly, lowered the girl to the ground and said goodbye. All summer Thumbelina lived alone in the forest. She made a cradle for herself from grass and leaves. She ate on pollen and dew, basked in the sun in clear weather, and hid from the rain under a large leaf of burdock. But soon cold rains and winds came. Thumbelina did not have a winter outfit, and she began to freeze. The girl suffered from hunger and cold. And one day she was sheltered by a field mouse. Hey! They lived together gloriously. The girl helped the mouse with the housework, told her fairy tales, and in return received warm housing and food. The field mouse had a neighbor, a wealthy blind mole, who did this by counting his wealth all the time. Even being blind, the mole realized that Thumbelina was very cute and offered to marry her. But the girl was not at all happy about this. She did not like the boring mole. Once, walking along the underground passages, Thumbelina saw a wounded swallow, which almost died of the cold. Oh no! All winter she took care of the sick bird, and by the spring she cured her. Before the wedding, Thumbelina asked the mouse to let her go upstairs to admire the sun at last. When she climbed out of the mouse hole, she saw a swallow, which she cured. Thumbelina complained to the bird that she was being forced to marry a nasty mole and live with him deep underground. The swallow invited the girl to fly with her to warm lands, and she agreed. She quickly said goodbye to the mouse, climbed onto the swallow, and they flew away. Once in a wonderful country, Thumbelina saw a huge meadow with beautiful flowers. She chose the most beautiful flower for herself to live in. Suddenly, she saw in the flower the same little man as she, only with wings. It was the king of the elves. And an elf lived in every flower. The beautiful elf has never seen a girl as small as himself, and even so beautiful. He immediately fell in love with Thumbelina, and invited her to become his wife, the queen of the elves and the queen of flowers. After all her adventures, the girl was happy to hear such an offer from the charming prince. She happily agreed. The elf took Thumbelina by the hand, and at the same moment 2 wings appeared behind her. Now she has become the queen of the elves. And since then they have lived happily ever after.